100%. Yeah, which is why I love Krishna's approach with it, in that it is a spectrum, and we're incredibly talented, we're incredibly smart. There's so many amazing people in this world. If we actually, if everyone started speaking up and talking about what they're seeing and feeling and noticing, and if we did all band together in that whole idea of oneness, we could do an incredible amount. It's just that we focus our energy often on the wrong things, or not necessarily the wrong things, the things that we think that matter that don't.
So what would Krishna's advice be to people listening to this? How can they make a difference in the event, in the shift, in the coming calamities? How can they, I think that one of them, we've discussed a few, like not being silent is, speaking up, not being scared of ridicule and judgment and being ostracized. I think that's a big one. That's why I read that whole chapter. What else would Krishna say?
Yeah, I think two major things. One is not disregarding the impact you can make in your own backyard and in your own local community, and how much change you can actually make, and how just by you knowing your local, land and how everything works, how much change you can affect in your area. And that logically, if we all did that things would naturally improve. The other thing is that we're all here for a reason.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello, and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. So great to be with you again. I have a really gorgeous, delicious Australian galactic goddess to introduce you to today. Her name is Courtney Beck, and she has just written an amazing book called Conversations with Krishna. So I haven't had Krishna on the show, so I thought I'd have Krishna on the show through Courtney. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Karen. I'm very happy to be here.
Now, Courtney's up near one of my favourite places on the planet, near Byron Bay, which is just divine. A bit hot in summer, I find, but perfect in winter. Actually,
Yes.
In summer, in the ocean up there, there's all those stingers for people that are listening from overseas. They're going to go, Australia's full of things that can kill you. Insects.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we've actually been going down every morning and doing some bodyboarding, and it's just been beautiful. But we've been blessed with very clear seas and no stingers, which has been amazing.
Yeah, sometimes they're a bit further north, but in summer you get these terrible sort of stinger jellyfishes up there. But anyway, we won't talk about that. Let me read you Courtney's amazing bio, because you're going to love this story, and we're going to talk about the book. So Courtney Beck appeared to have it all. She worked in advertising as well as well-respected and well-paid strategist for some of the world's top brands. And after years of climbing the corporate ranks, Courtney finally attained her dream position. She had a wonderful family, close friends, a circle of friends, and lived in a beautiful home by the water in Australia's upscale Sydney Harbour. Where were you in Sydney when you lived in Sydney?
Cremorne Point, which is a beautiful spot just across from the Opera House, basically.
I know, gorgeous. You did have it all according to what we're supposed to have.
Yes.
Just shy of Courtney's 35th birthday, and only 2 months after the role she had worked her entire life to land, she experienced what those in the spiritual world know as the dark night of the soul, a time of unexpected, unplanned, deep introspection when we question our very purpose, why we are here on earth. A divine voice called out to her, asking her to pursue a path she never imagined. The problem for Courtney was that this deeply personal transformation was not easy to explain to her loved ones, nor was there a box for it on a company form. I love that.
So true.
What religion? Dark night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, where am I? I've lost my place now. Where's the company box around a company form? She couldn't ignore it. She could ignore it and continue down the traditional path that she had trod, or she could answer the call, knowing that life as she knew it would change forever. You know, this is such a common story with so many people who are waking up now. And in December 2016, Courtney jumped off a corporate ladder in favor of living a simpler, more meaningful life, pursuing her talents she's always had but never talked about, her ability to channel messages from the other side or different dimensions.
Yes.
She began to scribe a series of manuals for life on Earth as we are destined to live. These guidebooks are dedicated to all seekers and illuminate a new way forward and a greater understanding, meaning and purpose. Today, Courtney spends her time as a channel, healer and coach for individuals and organisations. While she makes her home in her native Australia, she has clients all over the world and helps those she works with realise they are capable of more than they ever dreamed possible. Yeah, human potential.
Love it.
People see their human potential. We have no idea who we are. We think it's all about making money and going on trips overseas and, I don't know, going to expensive restaurants, but it's so not, right?
Yeah. And I think that was probably the hardest thing that I found was I had no idea how much of my identity was tied up in who I thought I was and the image that I presented the world and what I was good at and how much money I made and all of those things that we cling to give us some sense of identity.
But that's what we're programmed to believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest blessing I ever had in life, and it took me probably 30 years to get it, was that I was never good at making money. So I was always striving to make some sort of money and it was never happening for me. And reading your book, Conversations with Krishna, how many times it says in there, don't pursue money, don't pursue money, don't pursue money. It's like he says it like repeatedly.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've kind of, 2016, you decided to dedicate your life. Let's go into your story a little bit. What was happening to you when you went through your dark night of the soul? For people that are in their dark night of the soul, maybe this will help.
Yeah, so I was, I'd obviously, as you mentioned, I'd attained my dream role, which was working as a strategy director for a big media organization. And it was essentially the role that everyone said to me, man, like, Court, you are set now. You could just sit back in this job for the rest of your life and just cruise.
Yeah.
And it was just like all of these boxes had been ticked, but then I just felt this emptiness inside. And it was interesting too, because it had corresponded with my partner, Jules, being very sick at the time. So it was like my life was brought drastically into perspective, that I could either follow this path of, affluence and reputation and all of these things, or I could stop and really focus on what was going on at home for me, which was, Jules had tremendous health challenges and was really, I guess, questioning her time on earth here as well. So it all just kind of, my life essentially blew up all at once. I was sitting in this beautiful office in Sydney, having everything I thought I should have wanted, only to feel like it didn't mean anything anymore. And that was just gut-wrenching, because when you've spent years climbing this ladder only to get there and go, oh wow, the view's not actually as good as what I thought it would be. and knowing too that I would have to give up essentially everything, because I'd always loved having side projects and I was always doing writing and all kinds of other things, but to pursue this role, it would have been so all-encompassing. I would have had to have given up. Whilst I would have gained a lot, I would have had to have given up a lot of the things that I really loved as well. But yeah, it really, I ended up quitting the role 2 months into it. So I was smart enough to recognize that it wasn't going to get any better.
I bet your bosses were shocked.
But I
just want to, just something that stood out when I was reading the book yesterday about enjoying the journey. We're always striving to achieve the goal. I think it was under goals. And he said, when you climb when you climb a mountain, I think they said Mount Everest, how long can you stay at the top? You can only really stay there to take a selfie and say, I have reached the top, and then you've got to go because it's like too cold up there. Yeah. So he said, you know, the goal is never the goal, it's the journey that's the goal. Like, it's the journey. It's the journey up the mountain, it's the journey down the mountain. Enjoy both of them. Both of them are life-threatening, really. I mean, you know, climbing a mountain. And I thought, yeah, that's so true. When you're up the top of the mountain, you're there for a nanosecond.
Yeah.
You spend so much time and money thinking about the goal, and you're there for a nanosecond.
Yeah. And I think too, we invest so much energy in thinking that when we're going to get to this place, that it's going to fill us up. And because I think essentially we're all born with, you know, a hole in ourselves to a certain point where we're constantly trying to fill it with things, and that we believe that, you know, if we can just get to that next thing, that's when I'll be happy.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought. And I got there, and it was horrible. And it sounds crazy. It's very much a first world problem to be, you know, given a whole lot of money and to go, wow, this is not what I thought it would be. But ever since I was really little, I'd always felt like I was here to do something good in the world. And so working on alcohol brands and banks and telecommunications companies and solving things for them, I was like, that's not really what I thought I would be doing with my skills either. And it was only funny because Jules was so sick and we'd been to see so many different specialists and things, that I actually remembered that I'd done Reiki as a kid. And I was like, man, maybe I should try a Reiki on Jules. Maybe I just really, and it was total desperation because we'd turned to every medical expert that we could, only for me to go, okay, maybe this is what I need to try. And Jules and I frequently talk about it now, that potentially if she hadn't had been as sick as what she was, that maybe I wouldn't have been pushed to go down this path.
Oh, it just seems crazy that we have to reach a point of desperation to try something like an energy healing. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That just speaks to how conditioned we are. It really does. I mean, I don't know. I was not academic, so I didn't climb any corporate ladders. So I was like into it from the get-go, you know, but I wasn't under that conditioning. But most of the Western world is under that, you know. Anyway, so right. Okay, Reiki. So you tried Reiki, and what happened?
Well, what I found was that it came very easily to me. So ever since I was young, I'd always seen spirits and things, but I chose a very logical career. So working as a strategist, my job was to solve multi-million-dollar business problems. So, you know, saying to people, you know, I see spirits, I talk to dead people, was never going to come up in the boardroom ever. I never wanted to talk about it. And so I pushed it down for years. And it was only when I started tapping into it again that essentially, and I guess too at that same time as trying to help Jules, I thought to myself, okay, so what are you going to do? You've got all these skills. What's your plan? And so logically I thought maybe I'll just do meditation and just see. Maybe that'll just help me clear my mind, and maybe that's where I'll get an answer. And what I got was a spiritual awakening.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Oh, that is so cool. I love that. It's such a, I've had many stories like this on the show before too. It's been the pain of their own body, like Michaela Sheldon. I think I've told you about her. Did you check her out? You know, she was just in chronic pain, and she just, nothing was working. So meditation was the only thing. And then she had a spiritual awakening too. And now she's got access all areas. She's like channeling the cosmos. Wow. Isn't it interesting?
It was funny too, because when friends of mine would say to me, because they would ask why I would quit this job, and everyone would say, but you were so good at it. I said, yeah, but I hated it. And they would say to me, but what would you do if you weren't doing strategy? And I'd gotten to this point of just not caring anymore. And so I would say to people, all I want is someone to just give me a lab where I can just sit and learn all of the information in the world. And people would just look at me like I'd lost my mind, but I just didn't care at that point. But that was actually my wish, because I've always loved learning. And so being a channel is brilliant, because I can literally
have access
any question. And
that comes through. As soon as you said that, I had this image of the fifth element, you know, the girl, and she goes to someone's apartment and she's turning on the telly, like she's voraciously absorbing all this information, like, where am I, this strange planet, what happens here? That's just the image I had when you said all I want to do is sit and learn. I was just thought about her.
It's funny you say that though, because I used to have bright red hair, and people always say to me that I look like the girl from the Fifth Element.
There you go.
But yeah, I basically got my wish. So I went out for a run one morning because being very logical once again, I thought, okay, meditation, exercise, like you can figure this out. And so I'd been out on a run and sat down to do a very mainstream 5-minute meditation because that was all I could manage at the time. And I felt a spiral activate in my spine. And then I felt like my arms had lit up, like my forearms and into my hands. And obviously, you know, I've channeled before, and I would secretly channel things but never talk about it. But yeah, it all came through, and I was cold after going for a run, so I thought, I'm going to go and have a shower. Jumped in the shower, and it was this strange moment where I looked down at my body and I heard, so this is the body that you've chosen. And it was just instant that there was somebody else with me. And it was almost like the first time I'd seen my body, which was really strange. And then I had all of these strange food cravings that day. I was really excited to drive the car, which I drive in our family. So driving is not exciting for me, but it was particularly exciting on that day. But then I had the urge to write. So I just went with it, sat down at the computer, and that was the first 4 chapters of Conversations with Krishna that came through.
I'm going to ask you this question. Okay, so I'm going to go back. This is the body that you've chosen. Did you ask who's talking? Who is this?
Well, I was a bit freaked out at that point. And so after the shower, I went into Jules, my partner, and I said, this just happened. And Jules is the most incredibly understanding, gentle human being ever. And she just said, okay, well, let's just see what happens next. So, but I didn't actually, so it was after channeling the first 4 chapters that I said, so it was before that actually. We were going out to dinner that night, and it was to a friend of ours' place, and she's a yoga teacher. And I took it with me, the chapters I'd written, and just said, you know, can you just read it and tell me what you think? Just pure outsider's perspective. And she said, Court, this is Hindu cosmology. Where did you get this? And at that point I went, okay, this is really different. And then the next morning I tuned in and said, can I ask who's calling? And it's Krishna. And I didn't know who Krishna was at that point.
How did Jules had obviously studied some sort of Hindu.
Yeah, so it was actually, so it was this friend of ours, Emmy, the yoga teacher, who said this is Hindu cosmology.
Oh, right.
And that really shocked me, because I'd always been able to tune in to channel, you know, and I'd been in touch with my guides, but never anything like this. It was all about the creation of the universe, which was really different.
You know, as I read the book, it feels to me like every other spiritual literature that's out there, but it feels like it feels urgent. It feels simple. Yeah. It feels like it's just in really simple, but it feels urgent. The way it's written is there's so many you have to's, you must, you have to, you must. Like there's just so many of those. It's just talking at us. It's like saying it's instructions.
Yeah.
It's not wrapped in story like a lot of channeled material. It's never wrapped in story. It comes through as pure information. And although you can totally grasp it at the time you're reading it, you go, yeah, right, that makes sense. Yeah, of course. I find through my brain that it's hard to remember, because when you wrap information in story, it's kind of like, it's like gossip. Like you remember he said, she said, that happened, this happened. But a lot of channeled information is like that. It's not wrapped in story. And it's not until you actually start to, so you have to read it over and over and over again. And there's a lot of repetition in it, which I think is
purposeful.
Yeah. Because it's just like, yeah, you need to sort of read it about 1 trillion times before it starts to really filter through your cells, maybe. I don't know. Because like we talked about, we're so conditioned into another way of being.
Yeah. It definitely changes people. It has a power to it. It has really funny reactions when people see the cover of it, or when people hold it, they feel the energy of the book. Like there's lots of stories that I hear about people who, you know, they can hold the book and ask questions and open it up and it'll be the perfect chapter, or they'll be holding it in an airport and someone random will walk up to them and ask to hold the book. Like it holds a power to it. I've been told that I'll be writing books for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I found that out very early on in the piece that would be what I would be doing.
Absolutely. What I wanted to ask you was, you know, when I'm reading it, because I've been in this energy for a long time and reading books for a long time, it somewhat reminded me of Wayne Dyer's wrote 1 million books before he left his body, and they were very instructional as well.
Yeah.
You know, and Wayne was a student of every religious philosophy. And he always quoted from, he just took wisdom from everywhere and put it in his material. So it's pretty universal wisdom. I don't see it as Hindu or, you know, Krishna is like the Hindu god.
Yeah.
It just is universal to me. And I want to get into who Krishna is, but because, you know, we compartmentalize all this stuff. There's the Christians and the Buddhists and the Hindus and the Muslims and the this and the that. And they've all got different stuff, but really it's all the same stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's actually what I love about it, because I was a flat out atheist prior.
Right.
I've always been, so I've been really anti-religion since I came out of the womb. And I know because of all my past lives, what happened in those, that's probably had a fair bit to do with why I felt the way I did.
Well, that's the question I'm trying to allude to. Had you been a student of the Vedas or?
No. And it's really funny because there's a doctor in New York that I work with. So I'll often get sent what I call special projects. And they're people who come across my work, no idea how, and they'll come to me and say, I feel like I've been sent to you because you've got a message for me. Right. And it's like Krishna is handpicking these people who have these really amazing skills, like this doctor in New York. So he's a software developer and a doctor, but Krishna's asked him to develop a product of some kind for when technology fails and people need to be able to self-diagnose medically. But he's a student of Hindu texts. And he's actually read, so there's Conversations with Krishna, but then there's 2 books that we've written after that. And he's read those texts and said that they are modern versions of, you know, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, all of those. And so for me, because I purposefully don't study Hinduism, because I never want to be put in a position where someone could say to me, but Court, you've just read all of these books. So yeah, it was great to hear from him that it was just a very modern day delivery and very simple for our very busy minds.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the question I want to ask you, like, who is Krishna? So when you said it's Krishna, like you said, who's calling?
Yeah.
Did you, like, who is he? Can we ask you, like, who are you? Because, you know, the Hindus believe he's God. Because I was married to a Hare Krishna for a while. And like you, I have never been into any religion, any of them. But, you know, I enjoy aspects of all of them. And we used to go to the temple and eat all the food and enjoy it all and so on and so forth. But he was really into it, and he told me a lot of stuff. And, you know, the Hindus they call Krishna God. You know, but I don't know if he's you know, we're all God, we're all an extension of source energy, but I don't think anyway, so who is Krishna?
So Krishna, as we know him, is the Hindu deity of love, compassion, and tenderness. And there's lots of amazing stories about him, about how he's an incredible musician and lover, and he's like this favorite god because he's, you know, kind of awesome in so many different ways. What I find him to be is just a very beautiful teacher and guide. And I joke that he's like my spiritual father, in the sense that I think if I thought about him as a god, I would completely freak myself out. So for me, he's an incredible teacher and I guess the man that I go to for all of my guidance and who's re-taught me about the world. But he's he has a fantastic sense of humor and so much love and such brutal simplicity. I mean, his ability to make incredibly complex things so simple is just, I think that's what blows my mind. the most. But when I ask him, like when you ask the question, all I got back was, you know, I'm a man and I love the earth. And that's so
okay. So
him.
so reading it, I haven't read the Vedas. It's funny because years ago I went to a psychic. It was before I met my second husband. And she said, you have to read all the 24 books of the Vedas. And I'm like, do I? She said, yes, if you're going to be a teacher, you have to know God's word, and it's in these books. So that was her belief system. And I said, really? Doesn't really sit with me, right? And then she said, and you have to be a vegetarian. And I'd been an off and on vegetarian all my time. And so she's giving me all these rules of what I have to do. And so I had paid the woman. So I thought, well, if you're going to pay the woman, listen to her advice. But I was arguing with them. Anyway, within weeks of that reading, I met my husband, who was this really, really, really strict vegetarian. And all he took with him around when he left his wife were the 24 books of the Upanishads.
Wow. Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's what she was seeing. She was seeing him, but putting it through her belief system, saying that you have to do this, right? I never read them. I flicked through them and felt not compelled to read them at all. But I guess they're put in this book in really simplistic ways. Yeah, it's that's what I found reading Conversations with Krishna. It was just so simple,
yeah,
so easy to digest, and so simple. It's so simply put, and so I wonder if Vedas are like that too. Maybe they're not.
Oh, they're incredibly. I mean, when I have looked, and I started reading the Bhagavad Gita after I'd written Conversations with Krishna, just because I thought, God, if this is his story, I should be reading this. But not at any point has he ever asked me to do any of that. All I've been asked to do is just to be an open channel and just to be service. But it was really funny. One night I actually went to a puja, which is a Hindu blessing ceremony, and it went for 3 or 4 hours, and my knees get sore, and I struggle to sit still for that long. And it was really funny because he was actually sitting next to me, and I said to him during the ceremony, I said, "What do you think of this, Krishna?" And he said, "It's nice, but it's not necessary." And it was just like, God, I love you.
Oh, you're going to kill all my friends that just religiously do pujas. I'm sorry. In Sydney, there's a lot of the Eastern philosophy and kirtan.
Yeah.
I don't teach that way. Like when I came back from India, I had a plan to really make everything I teach very Western secular and not go too much into Eastern philosophies or Buddhist philosophies or any even religious, to make it really like your book, right? But there is so much, I don't know, it's probably up in Byron too, pujas everywhere. Everyone's pujaing.
Yeah. And I think he was touched by it. But I think for him and from what I know of him, I always remember him, I remember asking him one day, what should we be aiming to do? And he said, just to approach the world with a gentle hand and a kind heart. And so to me, whilst we might have different regimes and methodologies and things that we like and that make us feel better and that provide a certain structure, because I think structure makes us feel comfortable. And I think how they see things is very simple. And he frequently tells me how much we overcomplicate everything. And why, he asked me, why do you put these rules in place when we're not asking you to do that?
Okay. So how do you feel as a young Australian healer, teacher, with the responsibility on your shoulders of simplifying all those thousands of years of religious text and sort of dissing a lot of that dogmatic ritual, because so much ritual involved in, does it sort of weigh heavily on your shoulders or?
What weighs heavily on my shoulders is the reason why the books have been written. So that for me is so when you spoke about earlier, there's all of the musts in the text, and there is that sense of urgency. And I always say to people, like, when you read the book, you could read it as a really beautiful text, and maybe from that point you won't kill insects anymore. Like maybe you'll see plants as being alive, and there's kind of two paths that you could take. You can take that path where it changes your life to a point and maybe makes you more conscious. But then if you actually read the subtext of the book, what you'll see is what you saw is a very urgent message that we really need to change our ways. And so in the Hindu faith, they break time on earth up into 4 different chapters. And so the first chapter, we're the most conscious we've ever been. And the 4th chapter is kind of like we're in the Homer Simpson era now, like we're the least conscious we've ever been. And yes. we hurt each other, we hurt everything, we overconsume, we're quite, whilst we could think of ourselves as gods to a certain point because we master technology, you know, if technology fell over tomorrow, we'd be hopeless. We could never survive on earth without all of these creature comforts that we've developed. And so what I've been told, the reason the books exist is that they're essentially a map for getting humanity back on track. So where the first book, Conversations with Krishna, is a guide or a manual for life on earth as we were destined to live. The second book is all about the path to enlightenment, but it's Krishna's perspective on that. And then the third book is universal law, and it's Krishna's universal laws, or his perspective on that again, but it's actually told through the rise and fall of Atlantis, which is fascinating. But the urgency that I've been told about is that in 2020 we're going to go through what Krishna and I guess that whole group that I speak to, what they very politely call a rebalance, which is where the elements will essentially start taking back the earth. And I think there's going to be an element of us destroying ourselves to a point, because you've only got to, you know, be logical and look at the news at the moment to see how much pain there is in the world and how much anger there is rising to the surface.
You know, I got that wake-up call when we had Penny Kelly in the Inner Sanctum. So she's an amazing consciousness teacher, total amazing cosmic being. And she had the Kundalini experience in the 80s, and she had beings come to her and show her all Earth's probable futures around this time, right, of how death and destruction. And, you know, if you don't get your shit together, this is what you've got in front of you. And then she said in the Inner Sanctum the other day, I put a little snippet on the YouTube, that when she teaches her students to remote view, every time she gives them time and places. Mm-hmm. So like she'll give them a target, won't tell them what they're looking at. And every time she goes to 2021, they will say the same thing. She is in America though. I don't know if this is going to happen in Australia, but they all say the same thing. The cities are all empty. Nothing's working.
Yeah, which is fascinating, because I've been told that, you know, that our banking systems will fall over. Like I get, like I said earlier, these special projects that I get sent, which are these incredibly talented and smart people who are in very logical roles in the medical industry and engineering and things like that, that Krishna has tasked them with creating things that will help us after the fall, which is how they refer to it.
Right.
And unlike, I guess, the Mayan doomsday prophecies and things like that, where things will end on a particular day, what I've been told is that there's a spectrum that we're operating on, and that basically we have the next few years to reverse as much of what we've done as possible,
right? So
that the elements don't have to do as much in the rebalancing. And so, interestingly enough, I've been asked to concentrate on the US,
right? And
with my work.
You said you have a lot of US clients. Me too. I have a lot of US clients. You know, I had an Aboriginal guide speak to me recently. I had posed the question, why is Australia such a huge land mass and so arid and so uninhabited? Like 22, 24, I don't know what the count is, million people on this massive land mass. And then this Aboriginal elder came to me and said, because we're saving it for future Earth. There will be big changes in populated areas. But we've made this land arid so that populations wouldn't come here in their current consciousness. And when things shift and consciousness changes, so will the earth change in Australia, and it'll become more lush and green and more inhabitable. Mm-hmm. And then he said to me, in your future, beyond my lifetime, Australia will be the most populated place on the planet.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting. Yeah, it's been fascinating watching over the last couple of years of doing readings and healings for people, and how initially it was all very lighthearted and, you know, this is your purpose and you should get on to doing that because that's what you're here to do.
Yeah.
But then you know, there is a definite sense of urgency that's come through in the last year. I get lots of, you know, photographers who the spirit world asks them to document the planet as it is now. I work with lots of writers who they say to them, make sure that your books are printed with a publisher that's actually going to last beyond what happens, because people will need books. And so there's all of these plans getting put into place.
Oh, that just spoke to me right there, because I'm a real tech girl. I like everything to be on the computer. Like, I hate the paper trail.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, you got to chop down a tree and write a book. And so I'm into ebooks and anything you could watch, you know. But I got this book series up and running last year and started making physical books with the guides, sort of pushed me to do it. And I'm like, why? We've got the computer. But if the grid is taken out,
yeah,
we won't have the computer for a while, not forever, but for a while. And so we'll have to have the books back. Yeah. Ooh, that's kind of scary.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that's the hardest thing. Like, while I've been told that, Krishna told me that with my second book that I would get publicly shredded for that.
Say that again? Publicly shredded?
Yeah, as in that I think when I do eventually, because I'm still, I guess, I still feel like a baby in this world. Like, I'm very new to this. You know, I watched your interview last night with Barbara Jean, and, you know, she's been doing that for 30 years. And so funnily enough, I'm 37. So that really spoke to me, because that was the year that she came into her work as well. And so while I've definitely stepped more into, I guess, the public eye, much more than what I used to feel comfortable with, I think the more I step into it, the more, you know, I'm potentially going to attract attention and, you know, people potentially not liking the work that I do. So that part actually doesn't worry me as much. I'm more concerned about the earth and getting ourselves sorted.
But it's, I just think the younger generation are awesome. I hang out with a lot of them here in Sydney. All my school friends kind of hang out with their own generation, but I hang out with the younger generation. I just love it. But the 30s is the time where we are doing career and family predominantly, and that really takes a lot of our focus. So we need spokespeople like you who are in that, you know, in your 30s, to speak to that, you know, those people that are hypnotized by crawling the corporate ladder and getting married and having babies. I mean, it's fine to get married and have babies, but to wake them up to a larger calling too.
Yeah, it's a big one to swallow, and it's hard. You know, for a long time I felt like I knew a lot of information, but I wasn't quite ready to start sharing it. Funnily enough, even after I'd written the book, I still really struggled to talk to people about it and how to. And it's hilarious, because my whole career was built on my ability to speak, and yet I couldn't speak about what I'd made.
I have taken out a couple of chapters from your book, and one of them is called Silence, because this is what I speak about with my little inner sanctum tribe all the time. And so I took it out, and it's like, if you have woken, you must seek to find those who have also awakened, as anything you are becoming aware of is what they have become aware of. There are a number of people who have woken up, who are in the process of waking up. This is an uncommon and strange feeling as you begin to question everything that is around you, which we spoke about. When those who have woken up, naturally there is silence. The world we live in right now is driven by money, power, and wealth. God, how many times he says that, you know, like, which is true. Therefore, if you speak against it, those around you will question your intentions. People do not understand what has happened to you. Those who have not yet woken up do not want to question what they do not know, nor do they want to be told the future here on earth is grim and it is in need of change quickly. There is a huge sense of urgency. Therefore, those who have woken up tend to remain silent, observing as their mind continues to question change and growth. So you sort of go into, if you've woken up, you must seek to find those, so you repeat yourself again. So it's really saying, have these conversations with people despite being met with questioning glances and thinking you may have become unhinged. You only have to look to silence to confirm the damage we are doing to the earth, and those who ignore it are ignoring the fate of our world. You cannot simply look away and continue to earn money knowing that what is really going on will result in the end of money. It is a short-term view that does not help the earth or its people. If you have woken up, we suggest you get in contact with others who have woken up. You will feel at home amongst these people, and you can begin making changes needed to create a better, healthier earth. It's just so important for people. You know, I say I attract the New World teachers, and the New World teachers are people that are having an awakening, or that have had that. I ask you not to be silent. Yeah, you know, in your speaking about your experience, you're teaching others. That's what we're doing now, right? Sharing your experience. Yeah,
and I think it's really interesting speaking to a lot of people I know who are still, you know, living in Sydney and still working in the corporate world, but they have this feeling that they can't explain, that they need to prepare to leave the city.
Right.
And so, things like that happen all the time. And they're like, but where does this come from? And so these feelings are bubbling up in people, but they don't know what to do about it. And because everyone's too uncomfortable to say anything, no one speaks. But then it is really hard. And I often would question, you know, Krishna, why me? Why did you pick a strategist from the city, you know, who worked on big banks and telcos? Why this girl? And I wonder whether it's because my whole job was to figure out how to speak and deliver messages to consumers. So, you know, brands would bring products to me and I would have to go, okay, how do we need to talk about this in a way that is palatable for people, that makes them want to listen to it? And I think that's what Krishna's done with the books. Is it's incredibly easy to understand. Most of the people that read the books aren't spiritual. They feel drawn to it for some reason. They're very mainstream in how they think about the things, and yet they read the book and they no longer kill insects. Their whole relationship with the earth changes. How they think about themselves changes. They start to question if there's a larger purpose for them. So it has this beautiful ripple effect. And for people who look at the book and go, it's incredibly simple, I think it's incredibly smart that Krishna has written it in the way that he has, because it's so attainable to anybody. And even if you are on your spiritual path and you're quite far along, there is still so much in the book that can help reframe things for you. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. So I'm still on that question, like, who are you? Who are you? So I see him as a blue alien, you know, like
that's how I see him too.
Who has obviously been around longer than Earth and was part of the creator beings who were creating this paradise, because he speaks about in the book, is it Vishnu or I can't remember that, you know, Brahma? I don't know.
Brahma, yeah.
What's Brahma? Is Brahma a person?
Brahma's the creator.
Brahma's the creator. So Brahma is the name for God, is it?
Yeah, so from how Krishna talks about, so Brahma is the creator of this universe that we live in.
This universe.
But then he speaks about Brahma as being like an artist, and how there's many artists in the universe, and that the universe that we live within is essentially Brahma's creation. So what they're given is essentially a blank slate or a blank canvas, and they paint that canvas. So while we have Brahma, there's, you know, other versions and other creators throughout the universe as well. So not just one, there's actually many.
So I used to work in the film industry, and I'm getting this analogy, you know, when you create a movie,
yeah,
you know, there's all these creative minds that come together to create this movie.
Yeah,
like there's the makeup artist and the hairdressers and the clothing and the art directors and the lighting guys and sound and script editors, and so that's how I feel like the creator gods are all these creative beings coming to create the universe and painting all the different little worlds, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it is. And what I've come to realize lately is how important Earth is in the scheme of things with other planets, and how, what happens on Earth essentially creates a ripple effect to other planets as well. Yeah. So there's a reason why Earth is so heavily cared for and so influential, and it's because, if things go to hell on Earth, then chances are that's going to move to other planets as well. So we're actually incredibly important.
Yep.
And that's not even talking about parallel timelines. Like Krishna will talk about how, if a bomb goes off in this timeline, that it can actually be felt as a ripple in the next timeline as well. And I felt like I've hardly even gone into that. I've been so wrapped up in work that, there's so much we haven't even touched on.
When I was reading the book, I was just thinking, oh my God, there's so much more. There's so much more to come. So what are the name of the other two books? Are they out yet?
So the second book, no. So hoping to head to the US. So I've got an amazing literary agent over in the US. So the first book I self-published, but the second and third book, Krishna would love us to find a publisher that is going to stand the test of time and obviously make it through the fall.
Give you a reason for that? Because I'm self-publishing my books too, and I think publishers bar humbug. Did it give you a reason to find a publisher?
Yeah, Australia is one thing, but America is obviously a very busy and very loud market. So, whilst it's a spiritual text that has blessings in a lot of ways, it's still going to require a pretty big marketing machine to obviously get this out there to, mainstream people, because I think spiritual people instantly read it and get it, but they're probably already on that path where they're fairly conscious. So these books are definitely for the mainstream population and to help wake people up.
So how do you sell a book to a corporate mind, young Australian healer, channeling Krishna?
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. I do get lots of people sent to me, and they seem to be right at the point. Like I always joke that people come to me when they're on their knees, because they've generally tried everything else, and then they'll come to a healer for help. But I think that's probably why I was chosen to a point in that I can very happily and easily speak about global issues in a way that is easy to understand, and I'm not massively woo-woo, whilst I love it.
That strategy corporate background.
Yeah.
Let me ask you too, how does Krishna dovetail with all the other religions?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question.
Christianity, how does it all work? I know that at the core of all of them is the same message, love each other, one, you're all one, love each other, love the planet, love the earth. But how does it dovetail with all the other religions?
So Krishna tells me that it all comes back to the same energy, and that basically what we see and what we're drawn to, manifests on who we were born to be. So, for some people, Jesus is more palatable for them, and, they feel drawn to his energy. For me, it's funny because I've never looked into Hinduism ever, yet now I work with Kali and Krishna and Ganesha, and it's so funny. I would never have picked Hinduism, but what I really love about that is they have such a beautiful appreciation of the light and the dark parts of ourselves. So where some religions can demonize, the shadow self, Hinduism embraces it and says, well, you're both light and dark at the same time, and one's not going to fall away. That's just how you are.
Yeah. Play of opposites.
Yeah, so he talks about, that he's essentially the same as Jesus, and that they're all the same. They just manifest, physically to us in different ways.
So why did Krishna look more human? Well, he looks human, but he's blue, why did he not appear more human? Well, Krishna walked the earth as a man, right? Is that right?
Yeah. So the book that we've written, Universal Law, so that tells the rise and fall of Atlantis, and it actually tells it from Krishna's perspective because he was there. So I think that they do come down and manifest physically at different points through.
Well, that was that was the time where we were talking about, I don't know if that was on camera or off camera, my friend and client saying, I've been on Earth in the past, but it feels like I was here in the future, where the past was more like the future because aliens were on the Earth and we all walked together. We all knew about the cosmic family. Consciousness was more expanded, that we were in a higher vibration than we are currently. Yeah. So I guess that a blue being was just like normal back then, like, blue being, reptile being, whatever.
Yeah, well, it was, from what he speaks about in the book on Atlantis, it was an incredibly diverse place where equality was standard. Unlike it is today, where we have to fight for it, and it's a huge, it's a huge part of our world, and a huge separation between all of us. And religion plays a huge part, I think, in separating and segregating us. Whereas back then, Atlantis was like this beautiful bubble where everything was equal, and even all of the elements and everything. It was the web of life was essentially perfect and all just working in beautiful synchronicity. But then he also speaks of how outside of Atlantis the world was very different as well. So I think that Atlantis was one of the last beautiful places.
Okay. So Atlantis was
that fell.
Like a country. I'm not saying a city, more like a country. And then there were other countries where consciousness was falling, I suppose. People were fighting.
Yeah.
And then it like infected Atlantis, and that strive for power kind of became a part of the consciousness of Atlantis, and that's when it all fell apart. Yeah.
And there's this beautiful chapter in that book where Krishna talks about sitting essentially on the docks of Atlantis on the day that it fell, and him saying to the waves, "Don't hold back because I'm here." Wow. And I've got goosebumps as I say that, because that's one of the most, I think,
I'm going to cry again.
There was many moments in that book where I cried, and because as it comes through, it's like I'm hearing the story at the same time. But it was just, you could feel his love for that place, and also I'm tearing up now too, his sadness.
No, that totally got me. It's just like I want to bawl now. I don't know why I want to bawl, but
but I think what it does though is give us hope that we could get back to that place of beautiful equality where everyone is treated equally and everyone is loved, and that goes across plants, animals, people, crystals, the elements. It was like everything complemented everything else, and no one was trying to take more than what they needed to. And I can't even imagine how beautiful Earth would have been in that time.
Oh.
And how abundant it was, because Krishna talks about how barren our Earth is now, and there's so many beautiful parts of the Earth still now. But
there is. But like Penny said in the Inner Sanctum, it all still exists. It's just because we have this concept of linear time, but what's been before and what will be in front of us, it's all happening at once.
Yeah.
So we could go there. Like we could, I mean, you've written about it in a book, but we could project our consciousness and go there. Let's go check out Atlantis. What was it like? Even Future Earth, I've had a lot of people on the shows that have been to Future Earth in their astral body, and Garnet spoke about a woman who had some tragedy happen, and she moved to an ashram in India, and she went through forgiveness and enlightenment and moved herself to a state of consciousness. When she was meditating, she woke up, she was on a different planet. She was in Future Earth. She had ascended, and I'm like scratching my head thinking, can that really happen? Can that really happen? And then she took a physical body with her. I'm like, seriously?
Wow.
Right. And then she lived out the rest of her life on this Future Earth, which sounds like what Atlantis was like. No money systems, like everyone working together in harmony with the earth, everything. And then she died, and he spoke to her in her spirit and said, are you going to reincarnate back into Future Earth? And she said, no. It's the earth I came from that needs my help. I'm going back there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I know, right? I'm just all teary today. Okay. So
I was doing healings the other day, and I was telling I was telling Jules something, because often really beautiful learnings come through the healings, and I want to share them with Jules, my partner. And I was sitting on the couch crying, and I was like, oh my God, my heart is really open today. So I know how you feel.
So Krishna, little blue being, that don't hold back because I'm here. Well, he understands that he's not his body anyway. He understands that he's just wearing a particular...
Yeah, but he was still there in a very physical way, and he'd obviously lived with that community for a long time. I don't get the impression that people knew who he was, and I don't think it's his style to have been, I guess, public about the importance of his role or anything like that. But I don't know, for me that was a very humbling and probably the most beautiful moment of that book, just hearing him talk about that and imagining what that would have been like to have watched the waves coming in, to see something that was so beautiful essentially being taken back. But then I also get the impression that we're constantly going through rebirths on Earth, and
So candidness is another chapter that, and the rapture is another chapter but I won't read them out. Maybe do you want to say anything about those two chapters? I mean, they're small, so the book is like small, couple of paragraphs each chapter. So there's lots of chapters just sort of, called things like fear, candidness, hate, love, envy, whatever, connection, oneness, all these different things. You want to talk about the rapture? Because that was, again, what we've been speaking about.
Yeah, so I thought that was a fascinating chapter. That was, I guess, one of my more moments where I realised that this wasn't just a beautiful book. This is a beautiful book that's been written for a pretty serious reason. So, if you think back to this fourth chapter of where we're at on Earth and how we are in this Homer Simpson era, that for us to go back into a more enlightened state, something pretty huge has got to happen on this planet to shock us into action and also into change. So, Krishna talks about the rapture happening at different times on Earth. So, the dinosaurs, because I was always fascinated by dinosaurs as a kid. So that was one of my obvious questions that I asked Krishna about in one of our channeling sessions. But the rapture for me is just that we are constantly going through this death and rebirth, and so that it's coming no matter what.
The extinction thing. Is that what the rapture is?
Yeah, and I have been told that we will suffer a lot of loss in that time. That I guess a rebalance wouldn't be a rebalance if a certain amount of Earth wasn't lost. And it's not because they want to take things, it's just that the Earth is so out of balance we have to shift it back in. So
do you know Dolores Cannon's work?
I've heard a lot about her lately, and I would really like to start reading.
She left her body, but she regressed thousands of people and then documented everything they said, and a lot of them talked about what you're talking about, Earth changes. And which was interesting, because I was listening to this after I'd had the Aboriginal dude come and talk to me about Australia. And she talks about what's going to happen in different parts of the world. California's going to fall into the sea, and mountains are going to rise, and things are going to drop away, and there's all these massive earth changes. Again, I don't know if this is in our lifetime. Anyway, and then she said, and people always ask why I never talk about Australia. And then she has this big grin on her face, and the interviewer goes, well, why? And she goes, because nothing happens to Australia. It stays the same, like in the landmass stays the same.
Yeah.
And it kind of directly dovetailed with what the Aboriginal dude told me about, people coming here after the rapture, I suppose.
Interesting. Yeah, the only thing I've really heard about Australia is that, which is generally true for everywhere, is that we don't really want to be in cities when this happens. And Australia, most of our cities are by the water, so we were told a long time ago to move from where we were in Sydney to where we are now in Byron Bay, and we're sort of more in the mountains up here. But in lots of my guidance, so I did a session for someone the other day who's looking at moving to Hawaii, and Krishna was very explicit about her finding a house that was higher up in the mountains, and that to enjoy the ocean for the next year, but to make sure that you were going to be high up.
Well, damn, I'm going to be wiped out. I live right next to the ocean. That's okay. Maybe it's like if the ocean comes and takes me away, I will be the same as Krishna. Take me. I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'll be happy. Yeah.
I mean, he's talked a lot about how the population on Earth will essentially split into two, and that half the Earth's population will try and uphold the traditional structures that we have on Earth, and the other half will just go back to, a simpler way of living.
A different way of living.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked at the Venus Project by Jacques Fresco?
It's familiar, but you might have to remind me.
2017, he left his body, I should say. In 2017 at the age of 101. Amazing futurist. So he designed a whole cityscape, a whole country. Like he just redesigned the Earth. He designed it with technology in mind, but without monetary systems, policing systems, government systems, just as a collaborative. He designed a social project as well as an architectural project. Just amazing man, amazing, incredible man. Whether it'll ever, I see it as very feasible and plausible. I don't think we have to go back to being, my daughter lives down on a sustainable farm down the coast, and no water, no electricity, poops in the forest, cooks on a fire. And the guy that, the community, the three of them in the community, he is like completely obsessed with being this sort of caveman mentality and not using any of the, but I don't think we need to do that. I think we can embrace technology and still live in harmony with nature. I really feel like that.
Oh, I definitely think so too. And when my friends and I, when we, talk about if we were to start a community of some kind, or, when this all eventually happens, that we definitely want someone who can make beer and someone who can make bread, and that we still want to, enjoy life. And I think technology is so incredibly powerful. I just think our reliance on it is too much. I think it's always really interesting watching natural disasters happen in the world and watch how quickly humanity descends into chaos within, there was a festival on recently, I think it was actually last year, it's called the Fire Festival, and it was basically this beautiful festival on this amazing island in the Bahamas or somewhere. And
it's a doco on Netflix.
Yeah, it was really, really badly run, and there were all of these, really wealthy people who ended up on this island, but there was no food, and I think they had water. But within 24 hours, they were burning down tents and, stealing, and it's like, wow, it doesn't take much for us to lose our heads. And so if you think of something like banking going over, even if it went over for a week, how would we respond? And I think having answers to those questions is actually logically really healthy to...
Well, I guess we're going to find out, aren't we?
Yeah. And unless we actually, whilst I know there's going to be a rebalance of some kind, I do believe that we can do a lot in a couple of years, and we should try and do as much as we can.
Well, that's what we've got, a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
We've got a couple of years to...
Funnily enough, just quickly, a friend of mine who's an astrologer, I was chatting to her one day about 2020, and she frequently looks at the charts to see what world events are coming up. And she said that 2020 is unlike anything she's ever seen before. So,
well, there's some huge astrological alignment in keeping with like the harmonic convergence back in the 80s. There's some big astrological alignment in 2020 that everyone's talking about. I used to study astrology years ago, but I kind of did my head in and I had to stop thinking about it. But I'll listen to astrologers, and they're all talking about this big alignment, which is going to create some big shift. I don't know. There's plenty of stuff out there on the internet talking about bursts from the sun, the event. There's plenty of people out there talking about it. And I think that nothing is set in stone. It's up to us.
100%. Yeah, which is why I love Krishna's approach with it, in that it is a spectrum, and we're incredibly talented, we're incredibly smart. There's so many amazing people in this world. If we actually if everyone started speaking up and talking about what they're seeing and feeling and noticing, and if we did all band together in that whole idea of oneness, we could do an incredible amount. It's just that we focus our energy often on the wrong things, or not necessarily the wrong things, the things that we think that matter that don't.
So what would Krishna's advice be to people listening to this? How can they make a difference in the event, in the shift, in the coming calamities? How can they, I think that one of them, we've discussed a few, like not being silent is, speaking up, not being scared of ridicule and judgment and being ostracized. I think that's a big one. That's why I read that whole chapter. What else would Krishna say?
Yeah, I think two major things. One is not disregarding the impact you can make in your own backyard and in your own local community, and how much change you can actually make, and how just by you knowing your local, land and how everything works, how much change you can affect in your area. And that logically, if we all did that things would naturally improve. The other thing is that we're all here for a reason, and we all have a purpose to fulfill on earth in this time. If we all naturally stepped into our purpose, the byproduct of that would have to be, a raising in global consciousness. It makes sense. So, if we can become more conscious and stop looking out and start looking inwards more and looking at ourselves, that if we could just step into who we were born to be, everything would naturally improve, because the spirit is so pure, and it's just we're covered up by society's expectations and like you said, conditioning and part of our job, I think, with the healing work that we do is pulling all of that stuff off people. And I always say to people, like, everything you need is in you. You're just covered. We just have to, dig all of that off you, and who you are will naturally reveal itself.
Yeah. I've got this image of people wearing all these different overcoats.
Yeah.
Like taking off layers of coating. Yeah.
And I think too, like going through the spiritual awakening process, I think you can get to a point where you feel you're like, oh, my coats are all gone. And then you have this moment where you're like, no, I've still got heaps.
I know.
And then it starts again.
Absolutely. Like you said, like Barbara Jean, like I've been doing this work for over 30 years. Oh God, was I covered? Was I thick layers of coats when I was young? And just, peeling them off. And when you think that you're free of them, then something look, if you're getting upset about something, then you know that there are still thought forms, conditioned thought forms within you that you need to look at and work with. Yeah. So I have to say, I don't get too upset too often these days, but every now and then it hits me and I go, whoa, wow, what's going on there? What am I believing to be true that's not?
Yeah.
And they're the overcoats. They're the coating layers and layers of conditioned ideas of who we think we're not who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask what you think your biggest learnings have been going through? Because I am still a baby. It's only been a few years for me. What have been your biggest learnings going through the spiritual awakening process?
Oh, darn.
I know that's like a question.
It's so funny. So I was on the Inner Sanctum the other day and I was yabbering away to my little tribe about all this. And I was trying to think of Joe Dispenza's coming out to Australia,
Yeah.
And he has this saying, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember what he said. It's the name of his book. It's the name of his most, and I'm like, how does he phrase that? How does he phrase that? And so after the Inner Sanctum, 2 hours online, I go out with a girlfriend who's a makeup artist, and she's sort of on the fringe of this work, right? And she was driving the car. We were going to go and see her mum. And she's like, who I really like? That guy that says, breaking the habit of being yourself. And I'm like, that's it. That was like, I was racking my brain for this way he puts it, breaking the habit of being yourself. And it flew out of my girlfriend's mouth in the car. And I thought, and that is just what it's all about. Like, we think we are some way and we have this habitual way of being. And we just get into these grooves, these habits of being, habits. And we have this idea of what we think the world's all about. And we create these habitual sort of neural pathways, well-worn pathways. And it's breaking those habits, exactly how he puts it, of this is who I am. This is not who I am.
Yeah.
So here's the story for you. I was dating. Oh, you're going to love this. Oh, you are so funny. I was dating a guy called Krishna. Oh, my God. Because they give me stories to talk about, right? And I just realized the connection. An Indian guy called Krishna. I met him. I was a massage student at the time, and I had this client who hadn't turned up. I was in this, massage place, like tanning place that had massage. And he had a strange name. And I walked out. I saw this Indian guy sitting there, and it was after the session had ended. I'd sat there for an hour, like waiting for this. And I kind of got a shock. I saw him and I went, thinking, it's too late for you now. And it wasn't my client. It was just a friend of a friend who'd come to say hello, and his name was Krishna. He decided he wanted to date me, so we started dating. Long story short, he had this best friend that he used to tell everything to, who lived in Perth. He didn't tell me but that his best friend looked like Xena Warrior Woman. So when he told her that he was falling for me, she got really jealous and said, you can't fall, because he just worshipped her, right? And she loved being worshipped. She didn't want to be with him. She just didn't want him to be with anyone. He just didn't want her to worship him. So he dropped me like a hot potato and went to see her in Perth and didn't tell me that, sorry, I'm going to go and be with this best friend. So a month later, he calls me. And there's the habit of being myself. I could say, you bastard, you haven't rung me for a month. All these plans, you just dropped me like a hot potato. And he's like, I'm sick. So I'm working as a young healer at the time. I'm probably about your age. And I had a choice in that moment. Does the healer in me serve the patient, or does the ego in me tell him to fuck off?
Yeah.
And I had that choice in that moment. Isn't it interesting that his name was Krishna?
Yeah.
Too funny. And he's on the phone saying, please, can I come over for a healing, please? And every part of me wanted to say, no, F off. And then I thought, who am I? Who am I? Am I the dissed girlfriend, or am I a healer that's serving a client or a patient? And so I said, I'm the healer. I'm the healer. That's who I am. So I had to redefine myself.
Yeah, and that's big. That's a big leap, especially when you're carrying a bit of a wound as well.
Huge wound, like abandonment issues, like I'm not good enough issues. She was prettier than me and taller than me, and as I said, he failed to tell me she looked like Xena Warrior Woman. So all that crap came up, and I could either believe it or not. And I chose not to believe it. And that's the work, like, do you believe who you are not, or do you believe who you are? Who am I? Am I a being of love, or am I a jealous person, or a hateful person, or an upset person, or a depressed person, or am I a loving person? Am I a happy person? So we just have that choice in each moment to choose who we are.
Yeah.
So funny that they gave me that story and his name was Krishna.
Yeah.
My guides have a great sense of humour.
I was saying though to my stepdaughter Bella the other day, she's 14, and we were talking about something to do with school, and I said, why don't you just try doing the opposite? Like, we are so stuck in our ways. It's actually a really fun game just to do the opposite of what you would normally do. Like there's a guy that I listen to who does these amazing podcasts, and he talks about, telling people to push their comfort zones, and how a great thing to do is to walk into a cafe and lie on the floor for 5 seconds. And he's like, and the thing is you will survive. While socially you don't think that you will, it actually busts open these boxes that we keep ourselves in.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, it's if we don't question it, and there's a spiritual teacher that I really love listening to, a human spiritual teacher called Adyashanti, and I adore his teachings, and he frequently says that we can get so caught up in seeking the answers and reading what other people's answers are, but the most powerful thing for us is actually the questions we continue to ask ourselves. And the one question he said that we can ask is, what's the most important thing? And how we can ask that question for the rest of our lives. And he said, and it's a hard nut to crack, but you'll get far further answering that question than what you will bringing in any answers from anyone else, because you will have actually have done the work.
That's beautiful. That's in your book too? I'm pretty sure there was something in the book about the questions. Was that in your book or something else I read? Was that in the conversation?
I know Krishna talks about questions.
It might have been someone else, but
yeah.
Oh no, it might have been Whitley. No, I posted it on Facebook the other day. Yeah, humanity. Oh, that's what it was. It was somewhere else. It was like humanity is too young to have beliefs. Keep questioning or something like that. That's what it was. It was Anne Strieber, Whitney Strieber's wife, who has passed, said humanity is too young to have beliefs. Humanity just needs more questions. Yeah, so question everything. So what's most important? Another one, Neil Donald Walsh said in the Conversation with God books, or God said through Neil, what would love do now?
Yeah, massive.
So in that moment of dissed girlfriend, F off, healer, what would love do now? What would love do in that moment? Yeah.
Yeah, there's another book that he's written on the spiritual awakening process, Adyashanti, and it's called The End of Your World. And it's one of my favorite books. I just always find that every time I listen to it, I get something different. But he talks about the spiritual awakening process as being like falling out of a plane. And that as we're coming down, of course, if you try to grab onto things, you're naturally going to freak out and there's nothing to grab onto. So the more that we can just free fall, that eventually having that faith that we will end up where we need to be. And I think so much in our lives today, we are constantly grabbing for what we know and understand that we don't have time to look at or even think about what we're not even seeing or could be experiencing if we just surrendered.
Free fall. That's beautiful. You know, a lot of the podcasts I have are people have been through really dramatic awakening processes. So NDEs, senseless murder of their children. I'm just thinking of an Australian healer. She was a doctor and she saw her little 5, 7, 10-year-old child squashed in front of her in a car accident. Horrible. Car came careering down the hill and he was walking up from the beach and the car went, squashed him. And that just woke her up. And now she's channeling the language of light and she's rearranging DNA and doing all this stuff from this total atheist, skeptical doctor. That it can be dramatic. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It can be like what you're saying. It can be just asking questions. Question everything. Yeah.
I think just having that sense of openness that there might be more that you don't know about.
Yeah.
Like even if we think about extraterrestrials, I think I've always thought it's very arrogant of us to think we're the only ones that are here.
God, yeah, absolutely. It's so common sense to me. It's like, are you kidding? Like, what do you mean? Is there life on other planets? Are you serious? That's just ridiculous. It just seems ridiculous that we'd even have that. You know, like we'd even think that we were alone in the universe. That's crazy.
But I think that need to remove all the ambiguity in our lives, it just crushes the creativity and the excitement and this whole other world that we never, could potentially experience.
Oh, darling, what time is it? We've been yakking away for about an hour and a half.
We have been.
There is so much to come from Courtney Beck. Just exciting. Let's hope that not too much disaster happens. So so we can keep
everyone get to work.
Everyone get to work. Urgency. So get the book Conversation with Krishna. So regardless of being channeled, but from Krishna, it is a great book to give to people waking up. Maybe they find being channeled by Krishna channeling is cool. Maybe they think that's cool. But, it is a great book for people waking up to give to friends who are trying to sort it all out, understand it all, because it's put very simply. It's very direct. It's very instructional. Do this, don't do that. You must, this, that. And what are the other books that are coming?
So there's Awakened Souls, which is Krishna's perspective on the path to enlightenment. Universal Law, which is all about Atlantis. So we're hoping to head over to the US in the next couple of months.
Are they finished?
Yeah, they are. And so the next book I'm moving on to actually, whilst Krishna will remain a big part of my life, I'm actually moving on to channeling Isis next.
Right. And what does Isis have to say?
Well, so her part in things, as I've been told, is all about the creation of the new Earth.
Right.
So where Krishna is, I guess, helping us tie up the loose ends and setting us off on the path for what's coming. Isis is picking up where Krishna left off and helping us create and go where we need to in this new unexplored terrain.
We could do a whole nother podcast on Isis. So who is Isis?
So Isis is the Egyptian goddess of magic, of creation, motherhood. She plays many, many different parts. And it was funny because in my treatments, because Jules is a healer as well, so Jules, my partner, when she works on me, they'll often do upgrades and activations on me. And it was really funny. There was this Egyptian woman that sat in the background for a long time in my healings, and she just kind of sat off to the side in the darkness, and we never knew who she was. And then finally she stepped forward and revealed that it was Isis and that we were going to pick up next. But yeah, she's beautiful, very motherly, very strong. The healing work that we do with Isis is quite incredible. Krishna's energy is very cool and calm, whereas Isis, I see her energies, it almost looks like liquid gold, and it's like really deep sound waves that move through people. So I haven't started that yet. I imagine it's probably going to start soon, but I can't wait to see what she's got to share.
So did she also walk the earth as a physical being at some stage?
I would imagine she would have.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten into that with her yet, so
Right, quiz her.
I'll update you as soon as I hear.
Yeah, I had a girlfriend who killed herself when she was 36. And she was obsessing over Isis just before she died, and I didn't really understand it. She was just obsessing over it. But I wonder what that was all about. Anyway, I'll have to ask my mob.
She's definitely a very strong mother figure, and it's really interesting. A lot of the healings I'm getting at the moment, people are telling me they're coming to me because they're drawn to Isis. So, and it was that way with Krishna for a long time as well. So yeah, I think they push people like the tides. They push people in our direction when they're supposed to come to us.
Oh, beautiful. All right, well, we'll have to book in for another session with Isis.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Karen. It's been beautiful. And thank you to everyone for listening in as well. I really appreciate it.
It's been fascinating. Thanks so much for being on the show. Just delicious.
Thank you.
Isn't Courtney absolutely beautiful? Just amazing. So, conversation went where I didn't expect it to go today, but it's so interesting that we talked about 2020 and 2021 and earth changes and wake-up calls, because that's been on my mind, something chronic since I spoke to Penny Kelly in a SANCTUM last, where she's talked about her students seeing their cities not functioning. Again, it's not set in stone, but it is calling us to awaken, to speak out, to do what we can to help shift the consciousness on this planet. It happens, one at a time. It happens when you do the work on yourself, when you let go of resentment and hatred, do forgiveness, forgive all those people that you've ever known that dissed you. When you do the work, that's what it's all about. But 2020 is around the corner. 2021. Who knows what's going to happen? We'll have to wait and see. But big ramp up of the work to be done this year so that we can have more of a smooth transitioning from the old ways of being to the new ways of being. It doesn't have to be a sledgehammer moment, although it looks like it might be. If the unsustainable practices on our planet continue, we might need a bit of a sledgehammer moment for people to wake up from the money haze. It's all about making the money, the bottom line, the profit, instead of nurturing humanity or the planet at large and all her beings. So do what you can. And if you need help, reach out. I'm here to help you find the courage. I think with Barbara Jean, we spoke about the lion beings and the courage, and Ellen Dye, how all the lion beings are with us, with humanity at the moment, especially the light weavers, to give them courage to stand their ground, to speak what they know, to live what they know, even though people around you might judge you or diss you or not invite you to dinner anymore because you're a vegetarian. Be a vegetarian. Anyway, you don't have to be a vegetarian. Lots of love to you all. And remember, if you want support on your awakening journey as a New World teacher, join us in the Inner Sanctum. And remember to buy the books. I'll have Courtney's book on my webpage. If you want to buy the book, you can buy it through our affiliate link and support the show. Conversations with Krishna, beautiful book. It is very instructive, telling you how to live and how to be. But I think humanity needs it. And if you want to know anything else, I've got some fabulous people coming up for the show. Dr. Jeffrey, I can't remember his last name. I've got Grant Cameron coming up. We're going to talk about the messages in the music, how the ETs have put all the messages for humanity's evolution and their enlightenment in all the pop music. That's going to be a fascinating conversation with Grant. Who else is coming up? I've got stacks of people booked in for the coming weeks. So Jeff O'Driscoll was his name. And Bobby Richardson, beautiful another Australian girl coming up next week. We're going to talk about human ETs, speak about human potential and the history of mankind. That's going to be interesting with Bobby and her ET connections, and all sorts of fabulous people. Love you. Share the love. Share your stories. Expand your awareness. Share your stories in the Awakening Soul series too. Book 2 is hopefully coming out this year with people's awakening stories. We were just chatting about that. And, what I'm really looking for is some angelic stories. People having angelic encounters with what they know as an angel. Either they see them. I had Howard Storm talk about when he went through his near-death experience, a young doctor walked in the room and the room seemed to light up. And he thought it was some young doctor. And then when he walked out, he said to the nurse, "Who was that doctor?" And she said, "There was no doctor in here." It was an angel saying, "It's all right, you're going to be all right," everything like that. So I think sharing the angelic stories, just reminding us that we're supported and guided and loved. And sometimes these angelic beings can manifest into what we perceive as physical people. Yeah, I'd love some stories like that. So that's in the years to come next year. And also ETs, ET encounters, your ET encounters. I want to expand that consciousness too, that we're not alone in the universe and that we have our ET friends that are much more highly evolved than we are, many of them, most of them. And they're helping us as well. So we have help. There is help. There's help out there to help us overcome grief, to help us expand our awareness, to help us expand our technology, to help us expand the love so that we stop killing each other and killing the planet, killing the animals, and start living in a different way, in a new way, a new society. It's all part of the shift. Be a part of the shift. So I'd love to hear from you if you have these types of stories. Love you all. If you're looking for some guidance into who you are, why you're here, and what's it all about, we can help you. Me and the mob sort that out, get you activated. I've got a new elevator pitch. You want to hear it? The activator, accelerator, accentuator and acclimator of the New World Teachers. Remember to buy the book Awakened by Death. It's a beautiful book. Love you all. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye for now.